we had discussed the extent and nomenclature of this civilization. We had also examined the origin of Indus civilization. In this program, we shall see the characteristics or the morphology of some of the centers of the Indus civilization.
A morphological study of the sites of Mohenjo-daro and Harappa provide the best examples of the unique pattern of structures of the Indus cities. Now, Mohenjo-daro happens to be the principal site of Indus civilization in Sindh. It comprises an area of 200 hectares, and it has been described as the finest tract in the whole province. It gives smooth access to Bolan Pass and Kachi Plain. Excavations began here in 1922 by Rakhaldas Banerjee, as you know, and it continued till 1931 under John Marshall and E. Mackay. Now, there was a particular problem with regard to the findings of Mohenjo-daro. The water level at Mohenjo-daro had risen so high that it was not possible to determine whether it was on an early Indus level or it was on virgin soil. That is the biggest problem that the archaeologists have faced with regard to Mohenjo-daro. Now, at Mohenjo-daro, you can come across two distinct mounds that are separated by 200-meter wide and open space. It was a planned city. The town planning was done very meticulously. And there is on the one hand the Acropolis or citadel, which is built upon a high platform of clay. There are long, broad, unpaved roads running parallel to other roads, and lanes invariably meet at right angles. Buildings are made of mud bricks, but they are raised on fire brick foundation walls. The most important feature of Mohenjo-daro's urban situation is that it had an extremely advanced drainage system, which is the hallmark of an advanced civilization. Another feature is the Great Bath, which is a rectangular slide measuring 12 into 7 meters and 2.4 meters deep. Nearby there is a well that would supply water to this tank. Now, there is an interesting difference of opinion among the historians again on the purpose of this Great Bath. Now, according to Professor Irfan Habib, this Great Bath was meant only for the elite class in the city, not for the common people, but only for the elite section. On the other hand, we have Professor D.K. Chakraborty, who says that the Great Bath was really something like a sacrosanct tank that accompanies a Hindu temple, a typical Hindu temple, where you take a ritual bath before entering the portals of the temple. So there is this controversy then among the historians, and nothing really can be said for certain. Now, close to the Great Bath, there was a granary. Possibly it was a granary, and it has been interpreted universally by all the scholars that this was a granary, and this whole area is called the granary complex, right? And in fact, Professor D.K. Chakraborty also feels that this is the best explanation possible for this complex. Apart from this, there is a large pillared hall, and it has also again received different interpretations from historians. It has been interpreted as sometimes as an assembly hall, something like a town hall or an assembly hall, and sometimes as a market hall also. Its extent is 750 square meters. Now, all in all, there are about 2,000 to 3,000 houses in Mohenjo-daro. And as many as 700 wells have been discovered.
The structure of this well is oval. It was used either to fill water in the Great Bath or as a private well. This peepal leaf-shaped well may have been some significance to its builder. Whatever it be, today people look into these wells in bemused wonder. Maybe they hide within them secrets that are yet to be known. Excavations have left the walls of the well exposed. Mohenjo-daro indeed was a city that was built according to a plan. A lot of organization and labor must have gone into building such a complex city. Welcome to Harappa. This is an artist's rendition of how Harappa would have been a few millennia ago. Sir Alexander Cunningham first excavated this site in 1872-73. That, however, was not an archaeological excavation. He was removing ballast for the railway lines. The most important thing that he treasured was this seal. It was Rai Bahadur Dayaram Sahni who did extensive archaeological excavations in 1920. His work and the work at Mohenjo-daro at the same time brought to the attention of the world the oldest civilization of the Indian subcontinent. Harappa was probably smaller than Mohenjo-daro, but it was built in the same planned manner. There is the evidence of a massive granary. Around the granary, there are a number of quarters, probably used by the laborers who worked in the granary. Look at the 3 stones on both sides. What was their function? Is this an air inlet here? Mortimer Wheeler calls this area the granary complex. He came to this conclusion on the basis of burnt-out grains found in this site. However, Jonathan Kenoyer does not agree with this view. In his book entitled Ancient Cities of the Indus Valley Civilization, he says that the evidence of burnt grains or other articles associated with a granary is not sufficient to conclude that this indeed was a granary. Then, what was this site?
He of course does not state what it could be, but he is against this idea of calling it a granary complex.
Ma'am, will you please repeat the year of publishing his book?
He published his book in 1998. Now, according to a few other scholars in very recent times, this granary theory is based on comparison with Roman buildings. Now, they point out it simply came to be called a granary because the Roman granaries also looked like this. And but they rightly pointed out maybe that there are no parallels of such buildings in South Asian history. So can we really call this a granary? So there again we find a debate is being built up around this question. Now unfortunately most of the citadel buildings of Harappa are now destroyed. In fact, Harappa is much more destroyed than Mohenjo-daro is. And the lower town, however, offers some important sites. And the lower town had a boundary wall of mud bricks. It contained a large number of wells. It also showed a very highly advanced drainage system. And there were drains that coming out of the buildings that connected to the street drains. So the town planning of Mohenjo-daro and Harappa were typically the same.
Next, we shall move to another important site, Kalibangan. It was built on the banks of a river called Ghaggar, but it is no more there. It has now dried up. What is significant in Kalibangan is the discovery of these spots, considered to be fire altars. This is a ploughed field the first of its kind in the history of civilization. The pattern of ploughing continues in this region even today.
Now, its early strata, fortunately, is excellently preserved, and it existed till the mature Harappan period. Now, Kalibangan makes a very interesting study. I will tell you why. It was founded in the year 2900 BC, and it was a 750 feet long planned city in rectangular shape, and it used adobe brick. You know what adobe brick is? That is white clay, right? So it mainly used adobe brick. Now, but suddenly from 2650 BC, Kalibangan was abandoned by its inhabitants for reasons that are still not known to the historian. It was suddenly evacuated, suddenly abandoned. And 50 or 100 years later, we cannot be very certain, the place began to be reconstructed. It was built again after about somewhere about 50 to 100 years, and this time the pattern began to resemble very much that exists in Mohenjo-daro and Harappa. In other words, it seems that after the evacuation in 2650 BC, when it was rebuilt again after about 100 years, the town planning followed the same lines that exist in Mohenjo-daro and Harappa. So one can surmise that it was coming greatly under the influence of Mohenjo-daro. Now, there might have been a regular war. We are not certain about that. And but somehow it came under complete domination of Mohenjo-daro, and Kalibangan survived till as late as 1800 BC, 1800 BC, when the Ghaggar river completely dried up and the city lost its agricultural base. So this was what happened to Kalibangan. It disappeared once, but it was reconstructed, and when it was reconstructed, it followed the lines of Mohenjo-daro. Now, another important site is Lothal. Lothal, which is not far from Khambat or Cambay in Gujarat, and which is a seaport. It is a seaport, and it was founded in 2200 BC, and Lothal represents the typical features of Harappan towns. It is a typical Harappan town. It had the much advanced drainage system, and it had similar, roads, parallel roads running to each other. But its most remarkable feature, however, was a basin, right? A huge basin, a unique basin that was placed in the center of the city. It measured 770 feet in length, 120 feet wide, 15 feet deep, and it had two openings on either side, which resembled sluice gates. And most probably the basin was used as a dock, because underneath the basin there were two huge round stones with holes in it, and probably ships would come from far and would be anchored there. That is the conjecture that the archaeologists make, and so this is looked upon as a dock.
Again, there are different opinions about this basin. Some historians feel that the basin was a water reservoir for irrigation or for the use of the city. That is quite an advanced state of a civilization. The citizens here seem to have been quite wealthy because they used jewelry made of beads and other precious stones.
Now, apart from this, there are other signs in Lothal that go to show that this was indeed a very prosperous town. This was a very prosperous town. It had tools It had stone beads and seals, and the very famous Persian Gulf seal was found in this city. Not only that, Lothal was also a supplier of raw materials to other cities in the Indus civilization. For example, it supplied cloth from Gujarat. It supplied copper from Rajasthan. So it also had a very lucrative and a very thriving internal trade. And that is why Lothal can also be looked upon as a gateway, as an entry point. And it was not really a very large city. It was 900 feet long and 750 feet wide. And but its economic importance, as you can understand, is very, very significant. It's very, very high, right? It was a great center of trade and commerce, and it was an extremely prosperous area. Now, its decline set in sometime about 1850 BC. Suddenly we find a pattern of wild construction. You know, town planning was no longer adhered to. Houses would crop up anywhere and everywhere. Suddenly there was this pattern of wild construction which has not been suitably explained why. And maybe they could feel that the end was drawing near. That could be one reason, because the city really came to an end by 1700 BC, 1700 BC.
Dholavira. This is the newcomer to modern civilization. It was discovered in 1989-90. This is a city on an island of Gujarat in the Rann of Kutch.
It was a pretty large city, one can say. It was 60 hectares in extent, and the most important feature of Dholavira is that it has preserved its stone culture in an excellent way. There is an excellent preservation of stone culture. And Dholavira, like the other typical Indus cities, also had a walled acropolis. It had a walled acropolis like Mohenjo-daro and Harappa. Its walls and buildings are made of mud bricks, but stones substitute for fire bricks. This area, there was plenty of stone, right? So stones substitute for fire bricks. And it had the typical Indus town planning, parallel roads, water supply through tanks and wells, and it also had the largest Indus inscription. It also has the largest Indus inscription.
Ma'am, both Dholavira and Lothal seems to have, a close proximity to the sea. So, based on this, which was more important?
I think Lothal was more important as a seaport. Dholavira, of course, had access to the sea also, but we hear of Lothal being the more important commercial point.
Is that, do we get enough evidence to, artifacts and all?
Yes, certainly, because we do come across, precious stones like lapis lazuli and carnelian and turquoise that have been found in
abundance in
Lothal. They also knew the art of making holes in beads, which is what made this region into a very prosperous area, right? And Dholavira, the excavations have just started in 1990. So further excavations will, will unravel rather, more artifacts maybe, and then we will be able to say much more about the status of Dholavira. Right? Now, another important site is Sutkagendor. Close to Sutkagendor is Sotka Ko. You can find both these places from the map. This is on Dasht River near Pakistan's frontier with Iran. And close to Sutkagendor, there is a fortified enclosure. And this enclosure has been made by joining two natural ridges two natural ridges by thick walls made of stone blocks that is set in mud. And Sutka Gendor, as you can understand, is also very close to the sea. It is also very close to the sea. Now, Sotka Ko, we do not have much information about this place, but this is in the Shadi Kaur Valley. Shadi Kaur Valley. It remains largely unexcavated, but to a large extent it resembles Sutka Gendor. But maybe in future we will find more information about this region. So that brings us to the conclusion. To conclude, we should ask, I think, what does the foregoing analysis of these different sites in the Indus civilization lead us to surmise? Now, in the first place, I think, as far as the distribution of sites is concerned, we find that they're all well integrated. All the sites are agriculturally rich, right? They were extremely fertile regions, and they had abundance of natural resources. And last but not least, all these sites had external and internal trade routes. Now, if we come to the question of state formation, like what kind of a government did the Indus cities have, we have to conclude that towards the end of the Indus civilization, but beginning from the time of mature Harappan phase, we witness the dominance of Mohenjo-daro to some extent. That is, prior to 2500 BC, maybe all these cities were autonomous city-states. They were not politically dominated by any particular power. After 2500 BC, there is evidence of a striking uniformity among all the centers, among all the sites in Indus civilization. Now, this may have been achieved by wars and conquests, but the sudden decline of early Kalibangan in 2550 BC and its reconstruction in the uniform Harappan style about 50 to 100 years later seem to point to this direction. Now, Lothal and several other settlements which have been discovered in recent years can also be traced to the mature Harappan phase of rapid expansion and uniform reconstruction. So we can say, I think, that in all probability there was an Indus Empire with Mohenjo-daro as the capital. In fact, historians Hermann Kulke and Dietmar Rodermond think that, I quote, a new phase of imperial state formation in South Asia.